All right, today we're going to talk about the movement of materials. And that movement of materials is going to be into and out of the cell. All right, we're going to be moving into and out of the cell. So, what are some of our objectives today? Number one, you should be able to distinguish between active transport and passive transport. You should be able to tell me the difference between diffusion and osmosis. And finally, you should be able to explain how transport proteins work. Okay, so those are our three main objectives for today. So, we're going to start off talking about passive transport. So, on your very first flipbook page, it should be the tab for passive transport. Go ahead and on that, I want you to write the definition for diffusion and then write those two little dashes right here of what it is used for. So get this definition right here and then right here these two parts that diffusion is used for. Now, diffusion of molecules across the cell membrane without the use of energy. So, that is passive transport. The diffusion of materials across the cell's membrane without the use of energy. Now, this goes from a concentration of higher molecules to a concentration of lower molecules. So, it goes with the concentration gradient. So, as you can see here, there is at the start, okay, at the start there are more of these spheres up here, and they are going down here lower to a lower concentration area. So it's going from high concentration to low concentration. If you look at your cell on your passive transport page, it has the lightning bolts with the little slash through them. That means that there's no energy involved. We do not need energy for passive transport. Now look at the number of dots. Count the number of dots outside the cell and count the number of dots inside the cell. How many dots are outside the cell? 18. How many are inside the cell? 6, right? So what you're going to have is you're going to have a movement from outside the cell where there's 18 to inside the cell where there's 6 until it is equal. So 18 and 6 in my book has always been 24, right? So when would they be equal? 12 inside the cell, 12 outside the cell. So we will get the diffusion of these black dots inside of that cell until we have 12 inside, 12 outside, and that would be equilibrium. When those numbers are the same, those numbers are equal. Okay. Once again, passive transport is the movement of molecules across the membrane from a higher concentration to a lower concentration without the use of energy. Now, osmosis. What is it? What is osmosis? Osmosis is the diffusion of water molecules across the cell membrane. Osmosis. What is this osmosis? It is the diffusion of water. So it's a specific type of diffusion. It's the diffusion dealing with water. Now, osmosis, okay, this water moves from a high concentration to a low concentration going with the gradient. So it's going from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. It does not require energy, so it is also passive transport. No energy is required. So the diffusion of water from a high concentration to a low concentration until equilibrium is met is what we call osmosis. And once again, like I said, osmosis is passive transport. Now, next is active transport. So our third tab of our flip book is active transport. So go ahead and copy this down, and then we will discuss active transport. Now, with active transport, what is it? What is active transport? It is the movement of molecules across the cell membrane that requires energy, and we get that energy from ATP. The movement is from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. So we are moving against the concentration gradient. So if I would draw a little cell membrane, okay? So here's my cell membrane, and my nucleus is the orange dot there of the cell. Obviously, right here in this area, I have a high concentration of the little yellow dots, don't I? Up here, I have low concentration. Well, what active transport does is, using energy that we obtain from ATP, these three dots here can cross into the higher concentration. So we move from lower concentration to higher concentration. It goes against the gradient. But in order to go against the gradient, we need to have these lightning bolts. We need to have energy. Okay? Now, the bottom thing here says, molecules that are too large to move through the cell membrane easily. What does that mean? Well, that means those can also use active transport to get through the membrane. All right? We'll go ahead and look at how that happens by looking at transport proteins. So go ahead and copy these transport proteins down, and we'll discuss this. Transport proteins are proteins that are embedded in the cell membrane and they're responsible for picking up molecules from the outside or the inside of the cell and carrying them across the membrane. It's kind of like a tunnel. Okay, these transport proteins are kind of like a tunnel through the membrane. These molecules are too big to pass through the phospholipid bilayer of the cell membrane. So they can't get through unless we have transport proteins that will make a tunnel for these large molecules to pass through. In order for that to happen, we have to have energy. So the use of transport proteins requires energy, therefore it is active transport. Now, at the bottom of your page, I gave you a bicycle. What you need to do is you need to cut out your bicycle and draw this. Okay? Put the bike up at the top. Don't put it at the bottom. Okay? Whoa, whoa, whoa. I want this bike up at the top here. So put your bike up at the top. Let's see if I can get it back up there. Whoa, whoa. Stop, bike. Stop. Now, we have our bike at the top of the hill. All right? We're going to use this to help us remember active transport and passive transport. Now, obviously, if I'm at the top of the hill, this is where there's a high concentration, and down here are where there are low concentrations, right? So the peak of the hill, the top of the wave, the top of the hill is my high concentration. The bottom is my low, and I have low on each side. Now, if I have my bike right there, and my bike is going downhill, am I going to have to pedal? Am I going to have to exert any energy to go down that hill? No. So that side is passive transport. Because I don't have to exert any energy. We don't need energy to ride down the hill, do we? Okay, we don't need energy to ride down the hill. Now, let's say that my bike, dang it, let's say my bike is down here now. If my bike's down here and I'm going to ride up the hill to the top, so if I'm going from a low concentration to a high concentration, am I going to have to exert any energy to pedal that bike up that hill? Absolutely. So that side is active transport. So to pedal my bike up the hill, I am going to need some sort of, and this is my lightning bolt, some sort of energy, some sort of energy right here to ride my bike up the hill. So going from a low concentration to a high concentration, riding uphill takes energy, therefore It is active transport. If I am riding on the hill from a high concentration going down the hill to a low concentration, it doesn't take any energy to ride down the hill, does it? So that is passive transport. All right? So this diagram can help you remember active transport, passive transport, I hope.